this is Sahara Kiyoni, and in this video I'm going to be telling you some tricks about modeling round ducts, placing fan coils, and connecting ducts to the equipments. So let's just jump into the video. So as you can see over here in this clip, we have a fan coil, and the ducts that are connected to it are actually round ones, and there are also 3 branches to which the terminals are going to be connected. Now to begin with the modeling process, we're going to have to first open a proper template, or if you are working with a project for which the Arcane structural templates already exist and the settings are pre-adjusted, you could just use that one. But right now I'm just going to open a new template, and without considering the architecture and structure, I'm going to be teaching you how you can model these ducts. So to open a proper template, we're going to click on the New button in this first screen, and then in this window that opens, we're going to click on the Browse button, and now we could either use one of the imperial templates or a metric template. Let me just go back a folder. Then I'm going to go over to the English folder where I can find the mechanical default metric template. So select and open. Also under Create New, we're going to make sure project is selected, then click OK. Now we're going to have to wait for the template to open and we could begin drawing. Now in this template that I've opened, we could see the ducts in this view that is open right here. And just basically we could see the ducts in the views which go under the mechanical discipline. But we can't see them in views under plumbing. That's just this template setup. Now next, if we go over to one of the elevations, for example the east elevation, then we can see that there are 2 levels in this project, and the distance between these 2 levels is by 4,000. In other words, we could say that the ceiling of the first level is 4 meters high. Now we go back to the plan. The first thing I'm going to load is the equipment, so I'm going to go over to the Insert tab, then click on Load Family. And actually we have a fan coil family which we're going to select and then click open. The family was from the 2023 version and now it's been upgraded to 2024. You could also use one of Revit's default families. Let me tell you how you can find them. You go to the Insert tab and click Load Family, and then you're going to look through your families, for which I'm going to go to the metric folder, and after that go into Mechanical, then MEP, and finally we have air side components. The fan coil also functions with air, so we're going to have to go in here. And then we're going to look for the terminal units folder and open it. We have so many families here. We've got all sorts of fan coils. For example, this one is ceiling ducted, as in it's going to go into the ceiling like a duct. And there are also some other types of which we could select, or you could just look up the equipment that you're looking for to find it with the specific brand that you want it and download that. So we have loaded our fan coil family. Now to place it, we're going to have to go over to the Systems tab, and then we're going to be looking for the Mechanical Equipment tool. So once we click on that command, then we can see the last family that we've loaded. Now I'm going to also need to specify at which elevation from this level 1 do I want this fan coil to be placed. If you already have an Arcane structure plan, then that elevation would totally depend on that. It would depend on the elevation of the beams or the ceiling, and you're going to have to adapt the elevation to those. But right now we don't have that kind of plan, so we're just going to put a random elevation. We remember that the ceiling was 4,000 millimeters high, so for this one I'm going to put 3,000. Now I'm going to go to the drawing area and click somewhere to place it. We could also rotate our families by pressing the space bar. For example, I just pressed it 3 times to have it facing this way. Now I'm going to click and place it. Now the first round duct that we're going to be connecting to this fan coil has the diameter of 400 millimeters. Also, our fan coil has some connectors, and the size of one of them is 1240 by 240. So we're going to be needing a transition here. That transition is going to be rectangular to round. But if we go double check in that video we saw earlier, we notice that there isn't a directly rectangular to round transition. Instead, there's first a rectangular to rectangular, as in from the fan coil's connector size, which is 1240 by 240. That size has been transitioned to 40 by 40 or 400 by 400 to make it a square. And after that, the round duct is connected. So now we're going to see how we can do that. First, I'm going to click on here on this Create Duct button, or I could just right click on this clip right here, then select Draw Duct. Now the size that we want for this duct, like we said, its diameter is 400 by 400. So we're going to have to transition it to width of 400. And the same thing for the height, we're going to put 400. You could also go over to the Properties palette to select the fitting type that you'd like. For example, I'm going to keep it on this Radius Elbows tabs. Now we're going to go to the left and click, and then the transition will be placed. Rectangle to square. Let's go take a look at it in 3D. And also to have a better view, I'm going to set the detail level on fine and the display style on shaded. Now I'm going to rotate by holding the shift key and rolling the scroller wheel. So this is the transition that we got. Now after the transition, we don't want this square duct. Instead, we want a round one. Now to fix that, first it is best that we use the split tool, as in we could go to the Modify tab, then select the Split Element tool and split the duct, for example here. We're going to adjust the sizes later if needed, but for now I'm just going to select this duct, which is on the far side, and then go over to the Properties palette, and then change the fitting type of this rectangular duct to round, so that we could also add T-fittings to it. We're going to be using this type that is named T's, which we also saw in the video what they look like. So click. Okay, now let's go take a look again in 3D. And as you can see, our transitions go from rectangle to square, and then there's also a square to round. But still, if you look closely in that video, you can see that we didn't have a transition like this one, where a round duct would be directly connected to a square duct. Now, if I click on this transition over here, and then take a look at its type in the Properties palette, we can see that it says angle, as in the transition is angular. But instead, we actually want a transition so that we could modify by length. For example, let's measure the length of this one using this ruler tool. We can see that it's 100 millimeters wide. In fact, we're going to want that width to be a bit smaller, to the point where it's not even noticeable that there's a transition. So we're going to need to load a family. Going to the Insert tab, then selecting Load Family. Then I'm going to look through the metric families, then to the duct folder, and then the fittings. And we said that we wanted a rectangle to round transition, so we're going to have to go into the multi-shape folder, and finally into transitions. Now, if you take a look here, you can see a family that's called round to rectangular, which is also modified by length. We also have one with angle at the end, just like the one that we've loaded. So I'm going to select the length one, then click Open. Then I'm going to select this transition, and then I'm going to change this angular transition to the transition that we've just loaded. We should be able to find it under this most recently used types, or you could even look through the list to find it. Here it is. We're going to select it, and now I can readjust its length. You can see in the Properties palette we have this duct length parameter, which we're going to change from 380 to 5, just 5 millimeters. Then we're going to try to bring this transition as close as possible to the previous transition, like this. Now let's go take a look in 3D. And now it looks just like what we saw in that video. Now also, as for this larger transition, you can see that this one is also modified by angle. So let's open the drop down, where we can make its angle even narrower. For example, 60 degrees. And do you see what it looks like now? Or you could even load a whole other family, which could be modified by length as well. Just go to the Insert tab, Load Family, then again to the Metric folder, then Duct, and Fittings. And this time the transition is going to be rectangular, so we're going to have to go over to the Rectangular folder. Then we're going to go to the Transitions, and here we can find this transition family, which can be modified by length. So select and open. Now our family has been loaded, So we could just select this transition and then change its type to this rectangular modified by length. Its duct length is 375, which you could change to 500 or even 1000. And that's just going to be up to you as to how long you want your transition to be. Now also to make sure that this transition doesn't change back to an angular transition, you could just select the rectangular transition, then click on Edit Type, and then edit the fittings. And then in this next window, you could select that from now on, any transition that's going to be placed, it should be a transition modified by length. Just select that family, click OK, and OK. You could also do the same thing for the round duct. Just select it, go to Edit Type, then Edit Fittings, and then here you can see we have multi-shape transition, which is also rectangular to round. You could select that length family, then click OK, and OK. So from now on, any transition that's going to be placed is going to be modified by length. And as for these first two, we've adjusted them manually to transitions that can be modified by length. Okay, so we've drawn this far. Now to continue, I'm going to click on this round duct, then right click on it, select Draw Duct, and then I'm going to continue straight ahead. Now I also know that the size of this duct is changing. We also noticed that in the video. But I'm just going to continue drawing this duct with size 400. Now let's check the length of this duct. Here it is. The length is around 5 meters and a half. Now at this point, we should just take a look at the arc and structure plan to see exactly how long it should be. Now to draw the branches, I'm going to want to do that in a section. So create section, then click here, and we want the section to cover the whole thing. Now I'm going to right click and go to view in the section. I'm going to also stretch it from the bottom so we can also see the level 1. Then set the detail level on fine and display style on shaded. Now we're going to get the duct command DT, and we're going to want to draw a round duct, which will also have T fittings for the branches. And the diameter of this duct is already on 400. But as for the diameter of the branches that we're going to connect to it, we're going to want those to be 300. Now pay attention here, I'm going to click on the duct, but you focus on here. So click, and as you can see, it changed back to 400. So basically, it makes no difference whether you change the diameter or not, but as soon as you click on a duct in section, it's going to take the duct size. So don't forget, before you go any further, you need to click first and then change the diameter, 300, and then I'm going to click down here. Now, do you see this T fitting? Now also, after this T, the size of the duct changes and becomes 350. So first select the duct, then change the diameter to 350, and you will also get a transition. You can also see over here that it's called a round transition modified by angle. We could change it to 15 degrees, which will also make your transition longer. Now for the next branch, once again, we're going to get the duct command using its shortcut DT, and we said that we're not going to change the diameter first. Instead, we're going to click and then change the diameter 300, then go down here and click. Once again, the diameter changes here. The final size is going to be 300, which will also put a transition for us that we could select and change its angle to 15 degrees. Now moving on, right click, draw duct, and let me first make this duct a little longer, and then I'm going to draw downwards to make the branch. Now you could also make the length of these branches longer or shorter, depending on the elevation of your ceiling and the terminals that you're going to be placing. Now let's take a look in 3D, and this is what we have now, just like in that video. Now let's also observe some of our round fittings a little more. For instance, here we've got a T. Could we also have a different type of this T fitting? Let's go check it out. So first I'm going to go over to the Insert tab, then click on Load Family, and I'm going to go back a few folders, and then go into the Round folder. So the path is going to be Metric, then Duct, Fittings, and then Round. In this folder, we can find all types of round ducts, and the things that we wanted to check were the T's. So we're just going to go into the T's folder. Now here you can find all sorts of T fittings. Let's try to check some of them out. For example, this first one has detail at the end, which means it has more details. And it is also beveled, as you can see in the preview. So it's kind of like it could also have transitions. For example, here we had a T, then a transition, but this one could have direct transitions. We could also look through the others and select any of them that we want. And judging from the previews, it looks like they look more similar to what we saw in that video. We also have this lateral T-fitting, which you can see that it comes in variable angles and not explicitly 90 degrees. So there are all types of families. But for example, I'm going to select the second one and see what it looks like. Bowl head. We're going to click open to load it in here. And now let's try to place its family. Going to the Systems tab and then clicking on Duct Fitting. We can see the last thing that we've loaded here. And now we could go to the drawing area and click to place it. Then we're going to select it and then click on Rotate to rotate it if necessary. We just want it to be in the same orientation as the one we had in the video. Now the duct that we had over here, its diameter was 400, then it became 350, and the branches are also 300. So now I'm going to select this one. Its neck is 600, which I'm going to change to 300. Now the thing about this family is that this side of it, as well as this side, come in the same diameters, which means that if you modify the neck, the other sides will also change. Now the main duct was 400, so let's change it to that. And as you can see, then we would need a transition to place the terminal. Now on this side we needed 400 and then it changed to 350, which if we change its diameter, it'll become just like the transition. Now the type of this family is much more similar to what we saw in that video. Now if we want to finish it, we could right click, draw a duct, then draw a little bit to the left, and also on this side right click, draw a duct, and draw the duct to the right. Now the reason why this round duct is appearing like this is because we are in a section and its axis happens to be on the section's border. So if we move this up a little bit and move it away from the section border, we could see that our duct is totally round. So the transition is applied onto the T itself. Now if you select your family, then you could go over here to the Properties palette and modify the values of some parameters as you like. For example, the length of this part or the length of this transition. You could adjust all of those things from the Properties palette on the left. Now let's go see what we can do about this elbow. If you take a look at its name, you can see that it says 1.5D, which means that the radius of this central arc is 1.5 times the width of the duct that it's connected to. Now, if you open this drop down in the Properties palette, you can see that this family has some other types as well. Like this 1D, do you see how it's smaller now? Or 2D, and now the elbow is wider. Now to check out this whole thing together, I'm going to create a reference plane, one here and one here. And then I'm going to try to measure it from here to here. And you see we just tried to measure the radius of this elbow, and the diameter of the main duct was 300. So now if you divide 600 by 300, you get 2, which is just like this elbow, which is 2D. So that's what 2D, 1.5D, and 1D mean. Now let's go see if we have some other families for this elbow. Going over to the Insert tab, Load Family, and we were in the T's folder, so I'm going to go back one, then go into the Elbows folder. Here you can find all kinds of round elbows. For example, if you see in the preview, this one looks like this. Then this one is flat, but it's round on the sides. Then we also have this Gore family. And for example, this one looks like this in the preview. So first I'm going to hold the Control key and select these 3 families, then click Open. Let's go see what they look like. I'm going to also draw this one a little longer, in case those elbows have bigger radiuses and need more space. Now I'm going to select the elbow and go to the Properties palette, and find the 3 families that we've just loaded. First let's select this one, and you see how its angle is wider, but it seems to have some more parts to make it installable. This is pretty much just like what we had in the video, but as for its radius, we need to also check if we have exactly what we need. Now let's go check the second family. For example, this one that has 3 gore in it. This one looks like this. Let's also check out the third family, which is going to be this one right here, which looks like this. So there are also some more types for your elbow families. Also, don't forget that you don't need to necessarily draw your items and then change them. Instead, you could just select one round duct, then go to Edit Type. And then here you can see that in the type it says T, which is what it's been drawn with. You could just duplicate it, then give it a proper name, click OK, and then you could go over here to edit your fittings and define the specific families that you want to be used for each fitting. Thank you for being with me throughout this video. If you like to learn how to model ducts from scratch and also in a project-oriented manner, you can go ahead and get the tutorial package that I have put together over at the Udemy website.